Masquerade say More Zimbabwe, welcome to our channel, Zim Confessions and Deep Secrets. Kana kake kutamka kukuya pa nino channel, please don't forget to subscribe. Kana jungwa gara subscribe, but don't forget to comment and share this video. Nasi More Zimbabwe itavigirai nyayabuditswa na former Zimbabwean Finance Minister la Tendai Biti awabuda vachibreaka silence ndofunga kuba mariko zvakaitwa zvakare kuba vanhu zvinoshamisa vakuita bato reCCC vaTendai Biti vanobuda vachitaura about maissues avangobuda vachitaura vachiti he is the vice president webato reCCC vakataura kuti havana kukuita bato reCCC. So since then since muna January vanga vasati vambobuda vachitaura in public, but this time vabuda vachibreaka silence ku South Africa uko kwavanga vari muri Zimbabwe pavanga vachi pavataura about elections ku South Africa muri Zimbabwe vakachema nema-leaders emuSADC vakataura ma-leaders emuSADC vari kubatirira vanhu vakapa examples akaita South Africa pamwe chete neZimbabwe muri Zimbabwe. So vapa warning kuma-South Africans vakataura vachiti they should use their vote muswa 20 ari kuitwa muswa May 29 kuti prevent South Africa from going the same way yakaendwa nayo neZimbabwe. Vakataurirawo zvakare vachipa warning kuma other countries ari muno muSADC ari kurulwa ne-the liberation movement muri Zimbabwe. Vakabuda vachitaura at the Daily Mavericks gathering 2024 yakaitwa Cape Town muswe Thursday. Vakabuda vaTendai Biti vanova now the second vice president of opposition party Citizens Coalition for Change. Vakataura vachiti liberation movements former liberation movement SM South Africa are 6 since they were gripped by the same liberation ethos muri Zimbabwe ayo akapreoccupy power akapreoccupy power muri Zimbabwe achitadza kudevelopa their countries muri Zimbabwe and their people muri Zimbabwe. Since unless ANC yachinja itself iri likely kuramba ichiita zvairi kuita muri Zimbabwe. Biti vakakurudzira vanhu muSouth Africa kuti vavote for change sezvakaita vanhu vekuZambia muri Zimbabwe mabhiso avakaita the liberation movement muri Zimbabwe zvakare nezvakaitwa nevanhu vekuKenya kuti the opposition ikawanikwa ichiita take over the country. Vakabuda vabiti zvikanzi the liberation movement that fails to transform, the liberation movement that fails to democratize itself atrophies, it disappears. And I think you are seeing slowly here in South Africa the withering of the liberation movement. Vakabuda taurwa na vaTendai Biti zvikanzi noting the decline in ANC electoral support from the high levels under Mandela to May 2024, when if they got 40 and 44% they would have done very well. Vakabuda vachitaura vachiti so the acceleration of South Africa towards a state of state failure is beholding and bewildering to many South Africans who live north of the Limpopo because of the huge vast of resources that the country has, including a gross domestic product of almost 500 billion. But the story of South Africa is a story that has been narrated and lived in much of Africa, where it's been characterized by it's been characteristic of state failure, of pseudo elections, the ritual of elections that are held every 5 years. And this year, 2019 elections are from Africa, anosanganisira ari from Southern Africa, South Africa, Botswana, Namibia, Mozambique pamwe chete neMauritius muri Zimbabwe. And most elections are since independence Africa haana kumeka any difference muri Zimbabwe, and they often serve as mere rituals because elections are kungoitwa, but the ruling parties liberation movements parties akaliberata nyika ndo ari kuramba achiwanikwa achingo in my elections. So Biti vakurudzira kuti vanhu SADC vaoneke vachimekawo change muri Zimbabwe. Tisingazive kuti munoiona sei nyaya iyi muri Zimbabwe. Biti vabuda chitaura vachiti over 200,000 citizens in sub-Sahara regions, they live under the liberation movement muri Zimbabwe, and the problem the liberation movements vakashanda of course pakuliberata nyika, but havasi kutransforma nyika dzavo economically muri Zimbabwe, havasi kuliberata ma-citizens avo economically. So hanzi ma-citizens vazhinji emuSADC they are living in poverty muri Zimbabwe. Vakataura ivo vachiti ma-liberation movements they were concerned with power for power's sake instead of power to develop countries avari kuwanikwa vachitungamirira muri Zimbabwe. The liberation movements had all been driven by the pursuit of power at any cost. At any cost, the personal aggrandizement of their own leaders and the failure to build the nation state in the sense of a cohesive social fabric which brings every individual, every ethnic group together. And because they had failed to transform and deliver jobs, they had sorted to a primitive accumulation culture of entitlement, the culture of we're entitled to tenders and huge contracts because we liberated you. In Zimbabwe, it is very hard for one to get a job or a contract in public service unless aka participate in the liberation struggle in Zimbabwe. But the liberation movement takes advantage of the surrender by the citizens of its agency, and it uses two things to control citizens. Firstly, the weaponization of poverty, the weaponization of harm. And 69% of the poorest people in South Africa vote for the ANC. In Zimbabwe, where I come from, the ruling party finds dominance in the rural areas where poverty is the order of the day. So poverty is weaponized, ignorance is weaponized. Because when a person has a job, when a person can go into a supermarket and be able to put food on this table, he or she will not be owned by any political party and any political person. And here the liberation movement has been very careful. It has not allowed the emerging of independent black capital which can hold it to account. What in fact it has allowed is the emerging of parasitic black capital that owes its survival to it through tenders. So the independent, bourgeois, independent black capital is not allowed to exist because independent black capital becomes a threat himself to power. Muri Zimbabwe, vakabuda vachitaura ivo vachiti the constitution in Zimbabwe are worthless, and it's just a piece of paper. Muri Zimbabwe and the same ma constitution mu Southern Africa. Tingazive kuti munoiona sei yaburitswa na Tendai Biti muri Zimbabwe 2000 pamusoro penya yaburitswa na Tendai Biti about SADC countries muri Zimbabwe na SADC leaders avo ndio yarata kuganzara nasi 2000 pamusoro penya iyi mu comment section.
Movement that fails to transform, the liberation movement that fails to democratize itself, the liberation movement that fails to recreate itself dies a natural death. It atrophies, it disappears. And we've seen liberation movements disappear. Once upon a time there was UNIP in Zambia, it disappeared. Once upon a time there was KANU in Kenya, it disappeared. The liberation movement must go internal transformation, internal change, otherwise it will disappear. And I think you are seeing slowly here in South Africa the withering of the liberation movement.